If you're buying a home in Miami right now, you've probably heard the same warning everywhere. Florida insurance is in crisis. The mistake is assuming that the headline tells you what insurance will actually cost on the house that you're actually looking at. Because the statewide story and your actual premium aren't the same thing. The problems are actually real. They just don't hit every house equally. Two homes on the same street at the same price can cost completely different amounts to actually insure. So in this video, I'm going to show you what home insurance can actually cost in Miami in 2026, what makes that number go up or down, and how to get ahead of it while you still have time to decide. Here's where buyers usually get caught. They find the house, run the payment using the purchase price and taxes, and leave insurance as a placeholder. And that's because they don't really have the real number yet. That part is understandable because you usually can't get a reliable quote until the property is under contract and the insurance agent has enough information about the actual home. The problem is what happens next. The inspection comes back and the roof is older than you actually expected. The wind mitigation credits are limited, or the flood exposure actually changes the coverage the lender is requiring. Suddenly, the insurance number is not a small adjustment anymore. It changes the monthly payment and sometimes the entire decision. But by that point, the buyer has already spent money, started picturing their family in the house, and is working against the inspection deadline. So the goal is not to know the exact premium before you make an offer. It is to recognize the insurance risk early, then investigate it properly while the contract still gives you time to actually make a clear decision. So before we get into the first one, I'm Rocky Castro, and I've been helping families buy, sell, and relocate to Miami for more than 15 years. And insurance is one of those costs that buyers need to understand before they can judge the actual home clearly. So let's start with the question everyone's asking. For the past 3 years, you've seen the headlines. Carriers leaving the state, premiums climbing, people getting dropped by their insurance carriers. All of that was actually real, but the market today doesn't look exactly that way anymore. In 2026, there are real signs that things are actually starting to stabilize now. 3 things point in that direction. First, rates have stopped climbing the way that they actually were. Citizens lowered rates this year for many homeowners, including Miami-Dade, and several private carriers followed with reductions or much smaller increases of their own. That doesn't mean insurance is suddenly cheap, but it does tell you that the market is moving in a better direction. Second, insurance companies are finally coming back. New carriers have entered the market and existing companies are taking on more policies again. More competition gives homeowners more options than they had a few years ago. Third, Citizens has shrunk dramatically. At its peak, the state-backed insurer carried more than 1 million policies. Today, it is carrying far fewer because private insurers are taking many of those policies back. So, is the crisis over? Not really. But the honest answer is that it is actually easing, and it's uneven at the moment, but some homes are finally seeing real relief. Others are still difficult and expensive to insure. And that gap between one house and the next one is the whole point of this video. And here's what a lot of people get confused about. Because here's what the headlines just simply can't tell you. There is no single Miami insurance price. There is only the price to insure a specific house. Let me show you what I mean. One house can come in at about $7,000 a year, and the other one that looks identical online can come in with a premium of $13,000 or more per year. From the listings, there was no obvious reason for that difference. They were in the same area, around the same price, and looked fairly similar on paper. But once you looked at the roof, the wind mitigation, the age of the home, and the insurance history, that gap started to make sense. So the question is not, what does insurance cost in Miami? The better question is, what is it likely to make this particular house more expensive or more difficult to insure? That is what you need to know how to spot before you get too far in the process. And there are 3 things that usually have the biggest effect on the insurance conversation: the roof, the home's wind protection, and its flood exposure. Let's start with the roof because this is often where options begin to narrow. Insurers are looking at the age, the material, the condition, and how much useful life the roof appears to actually have left. A newer roof with the proper permits usually gives you a little bit more access to more carriers. An older roof may still be insurable, especially if it's still in good condition, passes the appropriate inspection, but the age can still limit which companies are actually willing to write the policy. That matters because fewer carrier options can mean a higher premium, a larger deductible, or a move towards the citizen's insurance. So when I'm looking at a house with a buyer, the roof is one of the first insurance questions I want answered. The second factor is wind protection. Every house in Miami has wind exposure, but they are not all built or protected the same way. Impact windows and doors matter, but they're only one part of it. The insurer will also look at how the roof is attached, the shape of the roof, the age of the home, and whether every opening has an approved form of protection. Those details are documented in the wind mitigation report. The stronger the documented protections, the more credits the homeowner may qualify for against the wind portion of the actual premium. Two similar houses can end up with very different premiums because one has the improvements and the documentation while the other one simply doesn't. The third factor is flood exposure, and this is where the broad neighborhood assumptions can get buyers into trouble. Flood insurance is separate from the standard homeowners policy. Whether a lender requires it usually depends on the flood designation assigned to that particular property. But even when it's not required, the buyer may still decide the exposure justifies carrying it. And you cannot determine that from the neighborhood name alone. Pinecrest, Palmetto Bay, Coral Gables, and Coconut Grove all have a variation within them. One section may sit in a lower risk zone, while other sections nearby may have a very different flood profile. The elevation of the structure, the flood zone, the type of foundation, and the amount of coverage all affect that number. So this is another place where you have to evaluate the actual property and not just rely on a general statement about the area. So none of these factors automatically makes a house a bad purchase, but together they tell you whether the insurance is likely to be straightforward or whether it deserves a closer attention once you are actually under contract. And if you're watching this because you're trying to get a better handle on the home buying process in Miami, I've put together a guide that walks through the costs, risks, and decisions buyers need to think through before they ever move forward. The link is in the description, or you can scan the QR code on the screen to get a copy. So what do you actually do with all of this? You don't need to know the exact premium before you make an offer. What you need to know is whether the house is showing signs that insurance could become a problem, and then use the contract period to get the real answer. Once the house is under contract, that is when the investigation starts. You order the general inspection, the wind mitigation report, and a 4-point inspection. And at the same time, you want to confirm the age of the roof by checking the permit history and looking up the actual flood zone for that specific property. Now your insurance agent is no longer working from a listing and a few assumptions. They have the actual condition of the house right in front of them. And that's when you can get a quote that actually means something. And if that number comes back much higher than you expected, you still have time to figure out why. Maybe there is something the seller can address. Maybe the price needs to be reconsidered. Or maybe the house simply no longer works once the full cost is actually on the table. But there is another side to this that buyers often miss. The first quote is not always the story on the house. A home may be expensive to insure because the roof is near the end of its life. The openings are not protected, or the documentation is incomplete. Fixing one of those issues can sometimes open up more carrier options and actually bring your premium down. There are also programs like My Safe Florida Home that may help eligible homeowners with certain wind mitigation improvements. Not every buyer or property will actually qualify, but it's another reason not to look at the first insurance quote as a permanent verdict. The goal is to understand what is driving the number. Once you know that, you can decide whether the problem is fixable, whether the cost still makes sense, or whether this is simply the wrong house. So let's pull this all together. Florida's insurance market is showing signs of improvement in 2026. Rates are beginning to stabilize, more carriers are writing policies, and Citizens has lowered rates for many homeowners. But that is the statewide story, and you're not insuring the state. You are insuring one house. That house has its own number, shaped by the roof, the wind protection, the flood exposure, and the documentation behind it. The buyers who get surprised are usually the ones who treat insurance like a number that they'll just simply sort out later. The better approach, though, is to recognize the risk early, then use the contract period to understand exactly what you're buying. Because the question isn't whether Miami is too expensive to actually insure. It's whether the particular house still makes sense once the insurance number is actually on the table. And if this video helped you look at insurance a little differently, please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. That is the best way to let me know these deeper Miami breakdowns are worth continuing. And if you're evaluating a home and need help making sense of the insurance, inspections, and the total monthly cost, my contact information is linked down below. That is a kind of property-specific review I walk buyers through before they ever decide how to move forward. Now, insurance is only one place where an older Miami home can actually surprise you. In this next video, I break down what changes when you buy an older home in Miami, including the inspections, the renovation limits, and issues that often don't show up in the actual listing. Click that video here and I'll see you there.